Hello and welcome to the latest Science for Sport podcast. I'm your host Matt Solomon, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Tom Brownlee. So Tom is an assistant professor at the University of Birmingham, where he makes sure his students get the best possible placements which give them a kickstart to their career. So who better today to discuss how you can improve your placement opportunities than Tom? So without further ado, it's time to welcome him onto the show. So Tom, welcome to the Science for Sport podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Thank you very much for joining us. So can you give us a quick introduction as to who you are and what you've been up to until now?
Sure. The quick version. I'm Dr. Tom Brownlee. I'm an assistant professor of applied sports sciences at the University of Birmingham. My background is in football. I did my PhD working at Liverpool Football Club. I've been working at the University of Birmingham for 3 years now, and primarily my research centres around football. And yeah, that's about it, I guess.
Awesome. So what kind of football research have you done recently?
So my research tends to focus around S&C. My PhD and my own research was more around youth strength training, so how practices can be optimized. And then a bit more broadly, I've got research around the use of GPS metrics, some stuff on female athletes, some stuff around communication of data, which is something which I'm quite passionate about, some stuff on referees. So mainly optimizing training and recovery practices, I suppose, would be the big umbrella.
Excellent. So we're here today to discuss how students can optimize their placement or internship process. Before we get on to how they can do that and how they can make the most of it all, can you give us a quick rundown of what kind of types of placements that students have available to them? And how that works for different kind of ages of students, so like first years all the way through to like graduates, for example.
Yeah, so I think it's first of all best to start off by saying that the opportunity for internships has never been greater, which is a fantastic thing. I think that I personally did a sandwich year way back in 2010-11, which makes me feel old every time I say it, which was at the University of Bath, which wasn't where I did my undergraduate degree. I did mine at the Coventry University. But a sandwich year was offered, and I saw the opportunity to upskill myself, which I think we'll probably talk about a little bit. So I went to the University of Bath for a year and worked with their applied exercise physiologists with their university athletes who are a good standard there, and other pro athletes using the facility. So that was quite off my own back. And then when I returned to do my final year at Coventry, having understood the benefits of doing something like that, I sent out about 30 or 40 emails off my own back looking for placement work myself, and I found something at Coventry City Football Club where I stayed in some capacity for the next 3 years through my undergraduate degree and then between Masters and PhD. The reason I start off way back there was because a lot of that was sort of self-driven, but thankfully that isn't really the case anymore. That was also unpaid, and thankfully that often isn't the case anymore, depending on the level of work that you're being asked to do. So at the University of Birmingham, for example, now we've got a nice pathway, which a few universities will have, where there will be some kind of placement option for second year students, for third year students. So our third years, for example, they do a variation of a dissertation, which is a bit more like an applied dissertation, working alongside a placement, which may be inside the university with their sports teams or externally. Then a lot of master's degrees also have embedded sometimes modules, sometimes slightly tangential external placements. And then, as I said at the beginning, my PhD was embedded within a sports club, and those embedded doctoral programs are becoming more and more common. So at Liverpool, I worked day to day as a strength conditioning coach, sports scientist within their academy. And I think a lot of the staff didn't even know that I wasn't actually a member of staff, but officially the club were paying the university, who were paying me a PhD stipend to conduct research alongside my work. So, nearly 15 years on from when I was sending out cold emails, now a lot of universities have these quite sort of formulaic pathways through from undergrad all the way through to doctoral level to support that applied learning as well as the theoretical that they're picking up in the classroom.
And obviously that can be advantageous and disadvantageous, right? So you've got all of these students going pretty much every year to do roughly the same thing. I mean, I don't want to get too much ahead of ourselves because we're going to talk about how you get jobs later, but there are many opportunities that come up through those internships, or is it the case that because they're always getting a student in, that actually there's not necessarily many opportunities for the people who are in to get a job?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for every placement provider, but I think that the positive thing from a sports science strength and conditioning point of view is, again, if I think back to 2010 when I was working with Coventry City's first team, they had one sports scientist and they had one full-time intern and two part-time interns, and that was the extent of their sports science provision, and that was a first-team championship club. Now, a first-team championship club, they were in the playoffs last year, they would probably have easily 4 or 5 on the physical side of full-time members of staff. So I think what helps is as those departments grow, it's natural that those heads of department lean towards people that they know will be a good fit. So let's imagine if you're working at a club, at an academy, let's say, and they have someone who heads the academy, someone who does the under-23s, someone who does the 18s, and then someone who does the 16s and down, and then they have maybe an intern or two. Well, as budgets grow, which they do through TV money, I know I'm talking about football specifically here, but maybe they decide actually they want 15s and 16s and a 14s and down, for example, and then suddenly there's a new member of staff available. I think the growth of the women's game is also, a huge opportunity there, and I know people that have gone and done internships at clubs and then gone and found roles within the women's side because, again, they've now had an increased budget to go from 1 or 2 members of staff to 2 or 3 members of staff, and again, for better or worse, we all know it's not what you know, it's who you know, and your network is your net worth and all that kind of stuff. And if you've been in there and you've made a good case for yourself, then, you're giving yourself the best opportunity, aren't you?
I think it's a really, it's a good way to look at it. There's a lot of opportunities, and hopefully with growing sports, you can get a foot in the door. Before we get on to the kind of like the goals and what you can get out of the placements, I'm interested to hear on the selection side of things. Let's say you're a student, right? And you go, I've got a big name organization. You can find whatever, Barcelona, Real Madrid. Let's keep it to stuff which aren't the people that you're going to work with. So Barcelona, Real Madrid, big teams, whatever, versus, let's say, Torquay United, who unfortunately are not a big team. But on the big team, you're going to do very little learning. You just get to watch and see what happens. And maybe on the smaller team, you get to learn a lot and apply a lot, and it's a great opportunity to develop yourself. How do students then weigh up the benefits and maybe the disadvantages to being in a really good organization? Looks great on your CV, but potentially not learning as much, to one that doesn't necessarily look so good on your CV, but you get a lot more out of it. How do you balance those two things in your decision making?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Matt. I think you're absolutely spot on, and we all know what that Dunning-Kruger curve looks like, and we've all been, my ambition way back in the day as I wanted to be first team fitness coach for England, or a Man United or a Liverpool or a City, because that's what you want to do. But I think that's what you see on TV, if you like. That's the sort of big final. That's what I'm after. But yeah, to use the examples you use, I'm glad you named some clubs, not me. If you went to, maybe let's keep it. Yeah, let's use yours. If you went to Real Madrid, they might have 15 first team physical fitness coaches doing various things. I know a Premier League club who have someone specific for recovery, someone specific for monitoring, someone specific for everything. Everything is done by an individual, which is great if they've got the finances to do it and that person can hone in on that skill and that person has full ownership and they live and breathe it. It's fantastic. But as you're alluding to, if you're going in there as a student, would you give yourself that opportunity to go and trial a different warm-up that day? Like, I don't know if I'd want that responsibility. But again, you said Torquay. I'll go back to my actual experience at Coventry. I was doing bits of everything. I was in the gym. I was on the pitch. I was, doing the protein shakes. I was doing the psychology, which at that level was the wellness questionnaires and that kind of thing. I was involved with the logistics on match day of making sure things were packed and taking the fringe players to do extra running and stuff like that. I was allowed trial and error, and as you suggest, you just learn so much more from doing that. And I've been in enough interviews recently with people on the club side asking students about their experiences, and we've had some really good students who have taken their own initiative to go and spend a day or two at top level clubs but they are just spending a day there. You could watch on YouTube how Liverpool train these days. You don't need to go to the club and watch it over the fence. But I think, and I know that these practitioners think that not even Torquay, they'd rather you go to your local Sunday league team and say, look, I'll do everything. And it's probably going to be easier to get in. A lot of the time students will come to us and say, oh, I can't find any opportunities. Like, I'm really struggling. And you say, well, drill down into what have you actually done here to try and do this? And, there are a lot of semi-pro clubs out there where, head coaches are kind of doing everything, and they'd probably love it if you came and took charge of the physical stuff. As a slight aside to that, I did a visiting lecture recently in Seoul in South Korea. It was online, unfortunately. And we got onto the subject of having how even non-sporting jobs can actually be hugely beneficial for transferable skills. If you come in and have an interview with me and you say, look, I actually don't have any skills within a sporting environment, but I've worked in retail or I've worked as a waiter, and you know what, I've really honed my skills of learning how to communicate with different people, and like you pick people who are difficult and who you need to manage in a certain way and things like that. Like, so you can even think a little bit more laterally than getting on the grass.
I strongly agree with that. I think spending a lot of time as a waiter and a barman means that you can pretty much chat crap with everyone, and that helps a lot when there's athletes in front of you that you can just have a normal chat with, and then get them to do the things that they need to do. But obviously, that's a great way to kind of weigh things up. When they do get a placement, like, what are the goals that students should be setting for themselves in terms of the different experiences and the different skills that they should be then attaining?
Yeah, I mean, I think in an ideal world, you firstly want to have a decent duration placement, because you do need to take a bit of time, because you will have had enough guests who have spoken to you about the importance of relationship cultivation and things like that. And we have placements in football clubs, and often they'll be full year long, or at university sports or teams, and they'll be year long. And the benefit of that is that obviously you have to go in and do whatever you're asked to do right off the bat, but you can probably be a little bit of a sponge, and you can probably sort of assess the environment a little bit and work out, who the potentially challenging characters might be, and work out how they need to be communicated with. And again, talk about that growing curve where you think you know more than you do towards the start of your career. And again, I did this at Coventry. I come from a track and field background, and I remember being in their gym sessions and saying to the head of first team fitness, like, oh, why aren't they doing Olympic lifting? Like, you say you want them to be fast and agile and all this, and you've got them doing this. And like, I've read a book on this, and I've just done my UKSCA, and now I know that if I'd have been a bit more standoffish and just sort of learnt the environment a little bit, then I probably would have been a bit more tactful in getting that idea across, perhaps. But to answer your question, I think you want to do as much as possible, because for a variety of reasons. A, because it upskills you, and B, this is a learning experience, and you're probably using it to inform where you want to move as well. You might really think that you want to be on the grass and you want to be an S&C coach, but spending a bit of time with the opposition analyst actually gives you a bit of an insight into how performance analysis works. Or you don't know what you don't know, do you? So you might think, oh, well, I know I want to do that. But if that's all you know, then that's where you go. So yeah, my advice would be to start off slow and quiet, and read the room and think about how you look to get a point across. But yeah, get as much experience as possible. And then that goes back to that Torquay versus Real Madrid point, doesn't it? You're going to be much more able to do that at Torquay than you are at Real Madrid.
Yeah, I imagine so, at least. And I'm really interrupting Tom to make sure that you're up to date and aware of the Science Sport Coach Academy. The Coach Academy is a series of lectures which are broken down into bite-sized chunks. That means you can fit it in and around your busy coaching schedule. What's more, every time you complete one of the courses, you'll get a certificate of completion which will prove your ongoing education. So if you're interested, you can get yourself into the Coach Academy completely for free for the next 7 days using the link in the show notes. And all you have to do is hit that link when the podcast is finished. When students then looking to get a job, obviously they've got let's assume that they've developed loads of skills, and they're coming to the end of an internship, potentially their third year, maybe as a postgrad. Should students be looking to get a job at their place of their internship, or is it a case that it's maybe not realistic for everyone to be able to do that, and you got to apply in other places? How does that look when it, eventually you need to buy some food, right? Like you're doing this so that you can get some money. So how do you then transition from that intern who's doing great work and has loads of skills through to someone who's a professional in the area?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that go in lots of different ways. We've been really fortunate with one of our championship placement providers this year who actually took on an undergraduate student straight out of their studies in full-time employment. That student was obviously good enough to go through that interview process, but there was an element of right place, right time, and a current member of staff moved elsewhere. And as I just said, if you've proved yourself for a year, then you put yourself in a good position. But often, or at times, that won't be an option, and you might have to go back out into the market. But I think that's where, one of my favorite sayings is you've only got one name, look after it. And I think you just never know, do you? It's a really small world, professional sport, as you know. So it might be that the head of academy that you worked under gets poached by the club down the road, and you get a call 6 months later. Or, we get calls at the university all the time about, we're looking to fill a role for under 14s or the first team or whatever. And, do you know of anyone? Because, these candidates still go through the full interview process, but any sort of level of filtering, much like we all like recommendations, don't we? Because, you trust people. So I think that's another really good reason to sort of apply yourself in the right way throughout the whole of your placement, because you just never know. Some people, it does take a bit more time. Some people do need further study. There's a lot of really good S&C sports science masters at the moment. We're launching a new program in September, High-Performance Sport at the University of Birmingham. Nice plug. Which is a bit of an S&C masters, but the other kind of third of the wheel of our content is around that communication side. It's helping you to understand the hierarchies and how these different systems operate in these environments and things like that. So, you might need to upskill yourself a little bit if you found it challenging, or it might have helped you to identify that perhaps you're not quite ready yet and you do need a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I've seen it happen all the way through. I've seen it, people get taken like that. And I've actually seen people say, I'm really glad I did that internship because it's made me realize I don't want to work in professional sport. And as an educator, that's just as good, I think, because who knows what it's going to be like before you do it. If it puts you on a different path, then that's brilliant. But yeah, I think to give yourself the best chance, you need to embed yourself, show willing, build relationships, be a good person, be around people, say the right things to the right people, but that sounds like it's a bit gamey. But, when I get a phone call saying we're looking for someone for an under 16s role, my brain automatically goes to the people that I'm aware of as being dependable, because I don't want to recommend someone that isn't, I don't want to put my name to someone that isn't suitable. So I suppose those relationships in every direction are really important, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. And when it comes to then, obviously, so when students are taking on these placements, they're getting experience which they wouldn't get through their standard education route, right? Like, so just by lectures, you don't learn what actually happens and how to do these things. So what kind of skills should students be learning at these organizations and placements, which they're then not learning in the classroom?
Yeah, and I think that has changed a little bit in academia in certain courses. And if I was to advise someone about to go to university who wanted a job like that, I would recommend for them to go to somewhere where the staff have got experience of doing that themselves. But with the best will in the world in classrooms, and to a point, you need that theoretical underpinning. You need to know how muscles contract. You need to know what protein synthesis is. You need to know what happens when you sleep and that kind of stuff, because you just need that level of theoretical understanding. But it is that operationalization of it, isn't it? And it is how you feel when you're face to face with an athlete or with a coach. And again, a second dirty plug, that's the kind of stuff that we're going to cover off in the new master's program, I think, because I've spent a long time saying, like, you probably can't teach that kind of stuff, but I think you probably can teach that kind of stuff. We at least have to try. So the short answer to your question is it's about experiencing and practicing the operationalization of that theory. And sometimes there needs to be a bit of lateral thinking there. So if you know, because you've read the textbook, that the best way for hypertrophy is to do X reps of Y sets of a compound movement in the gym, but you have to look at the bigger picture. You have to know how well they've been sleeping and when they last trained and when they last played and when they're next going to train and play and how good their diet is currently and what's going on at home and stuff. And it's that broader piece that you really can't train for without trying to do it, I think, coupled with the roundabout and the carnage of the relationships and the politics in the building and all of that kind of stuff. So that's again why having that initial period of understanding how it all fits together is really, really important. But yeah, I think you can have all the theoretical nous in the world, but until you've tried to put it into practice, it can be really tricky. A short anecdote for you. I know you're based in the Netherlands. I remember I went to Holland to do a tournament with Liverpool's under 19s, I think it was. And the coach they sent was the academy director, which was quite daunting. And I decided that I was going to tell him during the game that so-and-so might need to be subbed off soon because he'd done a lot of minutes in the tournament. And it was a proper Dunning-Kruger moment where I was like, I've assessed all the spreadsheet and I sidled up next to him on the bench. And it was a pretty uncomfortable conversation because I hadn't judged how that conversation was going to go. And he was like, well, the score's this, like, you really want me to bring this guy off? Are you sure? It was a challenge, but it was a good learning experience. And, it's difficult to get that in the classroom, I think.
And even when you describe that to students, right? Like you go, oh yeah, well, maybe I'd do that differently. You've got to be there and you've got to feel it to be able to get all of the intangibles and all that information and still be able to give your opinion, or to not give your opinion if that's the better option at the time.
Absolutely.
So when we kind of wrap all of this up, I'm interested to hear what you think an ideal placement would look like. So if you could make up a case study or give like the perfect world placement that a student could really learn optimally from and apply their knowledge and potentially get a job at the end of it, can you go through all of the different things that a student would need to do to make that perfect placement?
Yeah, that's a big question.
We'll be here for another half an hour.
I know, yeah. We're really lucky at the University of Birmingham. One of our placement providers is West Bromwich Albion Football Club, and we work closely with Dr. Tom Page, and he's brilliant. We might not call him perfect in case he listens to this, but the reason that he's great is we've had a good relationship with him for a number of years now, and so there's a really, really good understanding from both sides. So I think that's really important, because if Man City rang me up to have placements in Man City, of course I would, but unless our expectation of what the student is going to be doing and getting out of it and theirs were aligned, it could lead for an awful placement. So I think that level of understanding is really, really important. So everyone's on the same page. I mean, I believe you actually benefit from even sort of bad experiences, I suppose, because you know there's a lot to learn from setbacks. So I think that alignment of expectation is really, really important. Regular communication between all parties would be important as well to make sure that that's maintained. And then in terms of what it looks like from the student's point of view, I've already said I think long term is good. I don't think it needs to be super frequent because they're doing full-time study as well. But if they were to go in for a day a week across the season, that would be really good if that fits in around the studies. And ideally some kind of rotation of roles and responsibilities. And sometimes that's not always possible. You probably need a few more staff for that to be the case. But if you could spend some time, let's say it's an academy, with the under 12s, then with the under 16s, then with the under 23s, that they're such different groups to work with. And then maybe a bit of time with a nutritionist and maybe a bit of time with a psychologist and an analyst. And because obviously that's so enriching for you for the reasons I spoke about previously, because you get to see a bit of everything. So maybe for the first third to half of it, that happens, and then maybe you're able to specialize a little bit if there's a number of you and you can each pick which bit you like, and then you can go a bit deeper on the thing that you think's important. One thing which I used to, as a student, sort of really poo-poo was reflection, and I kind of thought that it was just something that our lecturers bolted on. Just, I don't know why I thought it was a bit woo-woo, to be honest, but I think now I'm an aged hippie, obviously, I think it's so important to reflect, and I think that level of introspection about what did I do today? And what did I do well and what could I have done better and how might I do that next time? And that's why setbacks are useful, because if everything goes really smoothly, A, you've got no resilience when something is challenging, and B, like, well, you're not really learning anything anyway, are you? So that's why I think that the BASES framework can be quite good, whether you're doing it with BASES or just to use it as a bit of a framework to improve yourself around. And then, yeah, I guess that's kind of it. It's do a bit of everything. It's I guess you would probably over that period increase your amount of speaking up. Perhaps that's probably not phrased too well, but as I said at the beginning, I wouldn't go in there all guns blazing. But contrary to that, towards the end, you probably, as you've built relationships with the right people, you should probably feel a bit confident to say, I've actually been reading a few articles on eccentric training, and I wonder if we, maybe we should incorporate that with some of the guys or girls. Like, can I take a small group and try that? Because, you do want to have a bit of autonomy for things, don't you? But it's all, the reason I think that these experiences are really challenging is because it's all such a fine balance. You need to be confident without being arrogant. You need to be able to speak up for yourself without being a loudmouth. You need to show that you have those craft skills without being a know-it-all. It is really hard, and that sort of sensitivity, that emotional intelligence is the difficult thing to develop. But I think without going in like a bull in a china shop, you probably give yourself the best chance. To go back to answer to your earlier question, again, having that relationship between the placement provider and the education placement provider. So in the case I use me and Tom Page at West Brom, again, that's really important, because then you can, we've had conversations where it might be, well, they're getting a little bit big for their boots now. Maybe we should turn that down a little bit. But that's good. So yeah, it's all about moving it forward together, I suppose.
Absolutely excellent. So, have you got any last little tips and tricks for students who are, on the cusp of getting an internship or during their internship, as to how they can really, improve that experience for themselves? Just maybe one or two quick fire things to finish off with.
Yeah, to go back one step, I did a LinkedIn post recently about common errors I see in applications for internships. Make sure your application matches the job description. Make it really easy for them to read what you do, what they want, and say, this person's worth interviewing, because it's amazing how many people don't do that. When you get in there, take your time, be open to everything, spread yourself around, take everything from it that you can. And if you're finding it difficult to get an opportunity, then look elsewhere and look down, in a sense, in terms of the name of the club, because your likely output of that experience will be massive. Certainly better than not getting an internship because you couldn't find one.
Yeah, excellent. Tom, absolutely fantastic stuff. Massive thanks. Where can people find a little bit more about you and what you're doing?
So at the University of Birmingham, I'm part of a smaller part of the school, which is the Graduate School of Sport and Professional Practice. We post weekly blogs about the kind of stuff that we do, which talks about some of the stuff we mentioned here. Best place for me is LinkedIn. I'm quite vocal. Twitter or X a bit less so, but yeah, you can find me on those places.
Perfect. Thanks very much, mate. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to speaking again soon.
Likewise.
Cheers, buddy. And that's it. Once again, a massive thanks to Tom for all of his hard work on today's podcast. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure you do at home too. Before you leave, I want to point you in the direction of the Science of Sport Coach Academy. The Coach Academy is an overgrowing library of sports science courses which are broken down into bite-sized chunks. So if you've enjoyed today's podcast and you want to get your hands on some more great sports science information, all you have to do is hit the link in the show notes and you can get into the Coach Academy completely for free for the next 7 days. What's more, every time you complete one of the courses, you get a certificate of completion to prove your ongoing education. And of course, if you have enjoyed today's podcast, it'd be fantastic if you could recommend it to a coach, a colleague, an athlete, or a friend. That means that we can keep bringing the best possible guests and the best possible content. And that's it. Once again, a massive thanks from me. I'm Matt Solomon for Science of Sport, and I'll speak to you next week.